Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, people may make the world go round, but it's music that makes the stories go round. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to assume that you do, because you're listening right now. You can subscribe to the podcast. You can hit that subscribe button, give us the old 5-star rating, basically on any of your podcast services. We're on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google. It's pretty much all good. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter, and we're on Instagram at either at In the Seats. Well, no, we're at In the Seats. Where else would we be? For all sorts of fun updates. And also, finally, and I say this a lot, but it's true. It's the most important thing. Please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because if we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please pay us a visit. On this episode, we got an interesting one. We're diving into the Apple TV show Pachinko, which if you have not already checked it out, I do recommend that you do, because it's really an excellent series based on a New York Times bestseller. It's a sweeping saga that chronicles the hopes and dreams of a Korean immigrant family across 4 generations as they leave their homeland in an indomitable quest to survive and thrive. It's definitely one of the better series on Apple TV Plus, and it's really an amazing piece of work to watch, and I cannot recommend it enough. It's got some really amazing people behind it, and I do think it even got greenlit for a second season, if I'm not mistaken. But everything on Apple TV Plus is just so good. So if you need an excuse to go check it out, this is definitely one of them. But they've got so much more good stuff coming there and coming down the pipe. But why we're here. We're talking a little bit about music on this one, and I mean the music on this one is really unique and it's really special, and it's something that helps to drive the overall story. And we had the distinct pleasure of sitting down with the man who composed the music, composer Nico Mulhy, and we asked him just about just sort of the nature of the work and how he got into the business and so on and so forth, because I mean, music is one of those things in TV and film that we don't necessarily think about, but it's such a driving factor, and it's such an important factor. And he's been doing some really good work. He also did the score for The Humans, which I know is out on VOD and DVD and Blu-ray now, so I do recommend you check that out as well. But first, enjoy our talk with Nico, because it's a good one. And as always, check out Pachinko on Apple TV Plus as soon as you get a chance. All right.
All right. Well, obviously, man, first off, just thank you so much for the time today. I appreciate this.
My pleasure.
Now, I mean, congrats on the work on the show, obviously. I mean, I really enjoyed the music. And I mean, it felt like it was traditional, but you were sort of exploring some sort of electronic or even sort of different elements with like reverberation and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I guess my first question for you is, like, on a show like this, do they come to you with the finished product, or do they come to you sort of early on and go, like, what do you think? Like, I'm always curious of the creative process from your end.
Sure. This was basically, they sent me the scripts of most of the episodes. This is, way before they even started shooting. And then they were sending me dailies. So I was literally just looking at what it looked like. And then they started sending the assemblies. And then, what was tricky about the show is that because it shuttles back and forth between time periods, there's, it was kind of difficult to kind of assemble it in my mind in the beginning. And so what was great about it was that Sue Hugh, the showrunner, has this extraordinary ability to kind of synthesize what it is that the whole thing is going to look like. And we had what I would basically say was a really good series of preliminary conversations that were both highly specific about a couple of scenes, from which I kind of divined what the overall sound world would be. And I started sending her sketches divorced from picture, or like loosely based on pictures. Like, okay, here's like this music whenever Solomon is like going down memory lane or whatever, that's like a thing. And so I was writing half to picture, half not to picture. I will say COVID made this all really weird in a way that it probably wouldn't have been quite so scattered if we'd been able to be in the same room. But basically that's what it was. And then as you know, because there's 8 episodes, different directors, different editors, as I got assemblies, then we would properly spot the episode and start playing with it, and then I would score to finish picture. But again, with something like this, it's like you're scoring one episode to totally not finished picture, and then another episode that's like completely locked, and then another episode that's like been sent to the producers but not to Apple. Like there are a million different configurations.
Well, I mean, that's wild, just because I mean, I'm always really quite fascinated just on your end of the process, because I mean, I look at something like this show, which is like it's coming back and forth and it's so dynamic, and then you look at something like The Humans, where you're in an apartment,
right?
And, and I mean, you still gotta do the work. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, like, for you, when you're trying to figure out the soundscapes, like, is it the space, is it the characters, like, what do you kind of pull from the narrative in order to sort of make the right music for the right moment?
This is a good question. I mean, to answer your question, rewinding a teeny bit, something like The Humans is so reliant on sound design, and there's so many moments where it's unclear what's sound and what's music, and that because as you say, you're in an apartment, it's a piece about atmosphere, and that's its own thing. With Pachinko, I was brought on so much earlier, so the sound design wasn't really happening until the mix. So essentially, what you figure out is, what's my band? Like, who am I playing with here? Like, who are the people in the soundtrack? Like, what are the Lego blocks that I have? And that's tricky because you have to figure out basically how big the thing needs to, like, what's the biggest it gets, right? And why? Like, why does it get big at that time? And so I thought that there needed to be 3 modalities of bigness, and the first one links 2 ideas, which is that when you've seen all 8, yeah? Yeah. Okay, so when she, at the very, very beginning, when she and her dad are in that field and the dragonflies, that's this kind of pure love expression. And the cool thing about that is that she never gets that again. That's it, right? It doesn't come back. But then at the very end of episode 8, when she's selling the kimchi in the market, we get a taste of that again, because she's like actualizing, right? She's like figured out this itinerary for herself. And the same way, it's like we're on her eyes, and then we go from the closest possible way you can see someone. You're basically inside her face, big out into the solar system. So that had to be big. And then she and her dad had to be big. And then also big was going to be this notion of empire. And here's where we get back into something like The Humans, where it's like that apartment is meant to be oppressive, right? That apartment is meant to be it's its own character, right? It's rather like the hotel in The Shining, right? Which is a little bit more explicit in the book than in the movie, but that all these moments when something is messed up in her life because of the imperial situation. So thinking about when the soldiers burst in to inform them that Hans was a communist and arrest everyone, that has to be big. And all of those big blocky cards that say, Osaka, and they say like what year it is, that has to belong to a kind of imperial cartography.
For sure.
And so that music had to be big too. And then once we figured out what that was, then everything else actually, so then it's clear, right? It's, and then the kind of weird composer brain turns up. You're like, okay, 2 piccolos, that's when you actually figure out what the instrument is. But then the other thing too is you have to take into account the schedule and the budget, which I know sounds pretty mercenary, but we didn't have like the London Symphony and 6 weeks in Abbey Road or whatever, like you have
for sure, right? Yeah.
With COVID restrictions. And at the beginning, you still couldn't have woodwinds in the same room with each other. So it's like you're and strings separated out, and it just changes the whole like mechanism for it.
No, for sure. And I mean, that kind of dovetails into my next question, because I mean, obviously on this, they brought you in pretty early. you had time to think and sort of design and let things evolve. I've got to imagine, as a composer, you have to be working constantly, because the next job, they may come to you with a locked picture and go, okay, I need something in 10 days. How do you, as sort of a creator, sort of keep the brain going to sort of balance between the two?
You get up early. I don't know what to tell you. Honestly, it's like I never worry about, like, you just have to, it's like, it's much easier to like run over rocks on the beach or whatever than it is to like actually kind of try to figure out where your feet go.
Yeah.
With something like this, it's, you just don't get up, you just don't stop. Like, you just have to kind of keep going. I mean, the plate spinning element of it was strong, but I have a great team, and Susanna, the music editor, is like world-class fabulous, and it worked. Like it happened. And as I said, it would have been easier had it not been for COVID, but to a certain extent, there was something kind of great about just being able to like deliver the stuff and then get notes. It wasn't this insane thing where you're all trying to go to some cutting room in Soho and like getting stuck in the subway or whatever. It's just like in my studio working.
Now, I mean, for you, was composer always sort of the dream, or like did you have rock star dreams growing up, as you're getting into the business and starting to evolve your music? For you, it was always about sort of composing music for stuff like this?
I'm doing exactly what I wanted. Yeah.
That's totally wild, because I mean, especially these days, we hear so many stories of, I mean, especially the way sort of film score has evolved from what people would traditionally think of, sort of that bombastic John Williams sound,
which I love, by the way.
So do I. Yeah, but I mean, it's really come to sort of very different places. And I mean, I guess, how did you sort of get your foot in the door then? How did you sort of get into composing music on a level like this?
Do you mean composing for film or composing
in general? Yeah.
It was weird. It just kind of snowballed. Like I was a okay pianist when I was, 11, 12, 13 years old. I sang in a church choir. I just kind of got bitten by it a little bit when I was, let's say, 12 or 13. And then I just loved it, and found that, interpreting music as you do when you're a pianist is one thing, and then creating music is another thing. And then it gives you this kind of miraculous control over time, which sounds kind of pretentious, but that is what it is. Like, if you write concert music, you're saying to, dear audience, like, you're mine for 20 minutes. Let's see how well we do. And so, yeah. And then I went to Juilliard, and then I had this kind of like apprenticeship with Philip Glass, the composer, which was sort of my pathway into both kind of doing more collaborative work, ballet or whatever, but then also through films. And I worked specifically with him on a bunch of his films, like in the 2000s.
Right. Okay.
And through which one learns a lot of things about how to do things and not how to do things, and like what, how to get through a really crazy process. And yeah, but there was no, I've never had like a master plan, which is probably to my detriment. I've just kind of been, I just haven't had time to like make one.
Now, I mean, this kind of dovetails into something else I want to ask, because I mean, obviously, like you said, you didn't have 6 weeks and a full orchestra and time at Abbey Road kind of thing, but the way technology has evolved, even in sort of like the past decade, you could be sitting on a computer and make something that sounds like you had 6 weeks at Abbey Road with a full orchestra. How has the technology kind of changed your job?
I can tell if you haven't. That's one of those things where it's like, if someone used like chicken broth from the store versus like the homemade stuff.
Okay.
Like, I fully disagree with that notion. It always sounds, those things always sound artificial. I think you always want to have, I don't know, I don't like it. It's fine. I'm glad you can do it, but I think people can tell the difference. And that haven't been said, there are wonderful sample libraries, and the people who make them are genius, and they're incredible for being able to communicate like what something will sound like, and I use them all the time. And like I would happily gay marry the entire East-West sample library team. It's amazing. Or Spitfire or whatever, it's like, especially Spitfire. But there's a limit to it. Like I try to make my demos sound pretty good, but not too good, because then they get addicted to it. Yeah. Right? Because it's like, again, if your demos are 18 violins recorded with, microphones more expensive than, the like
The violin itself.
but the budget of the movie itself,
Yeah.
it's not gonna you're gonna be disappointed. So I try to keep the demos pretty bare bones. But the other thing is, I think, there are a lot of really interesting soundtracks that are a combination. I'm thinking about Dan's soundtrack for Station 11, which is great because it's like stuff that's coming from the stage, stuff that's kind of scrappy, stuff that's like a marching band score when it needs to be big, when it needs to. So there are a lot of, not everything is like Lawrence of Arabia anymore.
No, but I mean, I think that's what I've loved about a lot of your work, because I mean, it's natural, but it still has it has that natural feel to it, as opposed to sort of any kind of faux bombast, which I mean, really, I think at the end of the day is what helps to evoke emotion in a story. And I mean, music is such a big part of that. And I mean, I'm kind of curious because, especially in this business, in some way or another, we're all kind of fans first. Was there like a score that you heard when you were a younger kid where the light bulb went off and went, I want to do that?
Wow, it's interesting. Weirdly, not really. And I think it was one of those things where I was never really hyper aware of scores until I started working for Philip, and realized how hard it is to do, and realized, because again, I didn't know, I assume that you send John Williams the thing, and then he does this genius thing. And but working on these films with Philip, like a great example was The Hours, is a really complicated thing, and there's a million people you have to talk to, and those things are so imprinted on me as a human being, not even just as a musician, that you kind of never forget how those things work. But I'm there's so many scores that are really, really wonderful. I think, I give this example all the time, but I think something like The Silence of the Lambs is a really clever score, because it's not a horror score. It's something very, very different, and it belongs to her and her performance. And
For
it's
sure.
like,
Yeah.
there are all these wonderful moments where you realize that it's about her perceiving, rather than a vampire movie, which it easily could have been. And then, but it's interesting too, like thinking about the way that music works in Kubrick, right, where it's mainly needle drops and really clever uses of score. That has an enormous power too, because it's a juxtaposition rather than score. So I don't know. I'm kind of up for everything. I don't have a big gun of governing philosophy about how these things work. And in general, when if I see a movie, I'm just so excited that if they still have hired an orchestra. There's nothing better than sitting up for a Star Wars and that chord comes in, you're just like, yeah,
Of course.
so good.
Of course, man. I mean, music is meant to elevate. And I mean, I definitely think your work here, and I mean on other projects as well, has done that. And I mean, it's a fantastic piece of work, and keep doing the good work, because I mean, honestly, the more movies I watch, the more I find myself not noticing the score, but appreciating when I don't notice the score, and then sort of thinking about it after the fact and understanding how it elevated the material. And I think your work's doing that and then some. And thank you so much for the time today, man.
I absolutely appreciate that. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.